hand you over to Katrina Crowe, who's the curator of the first Thought Talk. So thank you very much. Thanks, Katrina.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me all right? Yes, you can. Oisin really knows how to control microphones, which is very reassuring. A recent report from the GIA finds a crisis in rural clubs and a surge in their urban equivalents. Are we returning to the grim days of the 1950s when emigration decimated rural GAA teams? Are urban superclubs sucking up resources and providing a less focused service? If so, what can be done about it? Second Captain Ciaran Murphy and sports historian Paul Rouse, there they are in all their splendour, are going to be put through their paces on this most engaging of subjects by Sinead O'Carroll, editor of thejournal.ie. Sinead is a former camogie player who now plays golf, which I see as a downgrade, but it's easier, I suppose, and less exhausting. Whereas Ciaran is taking up hurling at the age of, what, 42?
43 now.
43.
We won't argue over 1 year, you know.
And I think that's very brave of you and a wonderful thing to be doing.
That's the word for it.
Sinead was an experienced sports journalist before she became the big boss at the Journal, and she's a well-known broadcaster with several media outlets. She will moderate a well-informed, good-tempered and lively discussion on the future of the organisation, which has been the glue of Irish society for many decades. Please welcome our guests.
I'm not sure how good-natured I'll be. I just talked for 10 minutes to Paul about the hurling football divide in Offaly, and so thank you very much for taking the time out of your Saturday afternoon on this very busy sporting weekend. It's okay if some of you want to check on how Rory McIlroy is doing, 3 under through 4, so also okay if some of you
lock the door there quick.
But no better people to talk about the GA's favourite pastime, its existential crisis, than Paul and Ciaran. I had some intros for you, but Katrina has done the job. But as far as podcasting goes, I was like, we've got a good crowd. Obviously a second captain and someone who has done 2 stints recently on The Rest is History. I won't mention any podcasting I do on the back of those 2 shout-outs. The ticket sales page for this talked about depopulation, and the last line of it was that the GA is the glue that holds Irish society together, and it has done so for decades. Paul, is that true? And if so, how is it true, and why is it true?
I don't think it's true. I think the GA is a fundamentally important part of Irish society, but it depends on where you are, how strong a club is in your area, how prominent the games are in your county, to say it's the glue. Also, no matter how prominent a club is in any given area, there's not one person in this room couldn't tell you that there aren't people in that area who have no interest in the Gaelic Athletic Association or would actually prefer not to know anything about it. So I think we have to be really careful about overstating the importance of the GAA while still acknowledging that it is extremely important to the lives of many people. And there are generations of Irish people whose lives have been fundamentally enriched by involvement in the association. There is not one parish which has not been changed by the presence of the association. But I balk slightly at presenting ourselves as the glue. I will say a glue.
You have overstated the importance of the GA in your life, Ciaran.
Sounds like it.
Can you overstate it in the?
Yeah, that's interesting. I make it a habit not to disagree with the good doctor. So, but no, the one thing I would say though is that what it does is what the GA does. If it's not the glue, it is at least the distinguishing factor between places, I think, you know, so that if you come from a county, then however we've allowed it to happen over the course of 140 or 150 years, like if you talk about Cork people or Tipperary people this weekend, you know, they're talked about as a monolith, you know, that Cork people are arrogant, you know, or that Tipperary people are, you know, muck savages, for instance. I mean, I'm sure there's some Tipperary people here. But I'm joking, of course. But, you know, like for better or worse, that Galway people are, you know, sophisticates, you know, like that. Like, we're taking that from how our football team plays, which is absurd, obviously absurd. But I do think that, like, it gives meaning to places, you know, it gives meaning to counties, it gives meaning, I think in a more visceral sense even, to villages. And as we enter into this discussion, I think we'll talk about what a GA club means to a place, but also maybe what the lack of a GA club means to a place. You know, does a place without a GA club lack coherence or lack something that, you know, an adhesive that brings people in the 2 or 3 mile radius of that place? Do they lack something that the people down the road have just because they have a GA club? And I think that that's a really important kind of part of this debate, because what we'll end up talking about is, you know, amalgamations or clubs deciding to go it alone because they can't see a future for that place if it doesn't have a GA club. The post office is gone. The Garda station is closed. You do your shopping in the town 10 miles down the road. What else do we have if we don't have the GA club? So I think that that's kind of, again, the glue is maybe overstating it, but maybe it's not overstating it by that much.
Well, that is where you find agreement in the disagreement to the answer to the question, that depending on how strong the GA club is,
or how
the
successful
is. So just to look at the numbers and to look at where we're going to go with the population. I was on the drive here this morning, and my husband, who is not a card-carrying GA member, but he is from Cork, so we'll see how he goes tomorrow. He said, how many GA clubs are there anyway? And I said, just over 1,600. He went, that's too many. So that was his sense as a non-GA person. If you look at the divide of those, just to give a sense of the numbers, if you put a line down the eastern seaboard and looked at the population of the country, there's over 3 million of us on that side, you know, Dublin, the Pale, all the way up to Antrim, Louth, and down to Wexford. And there's only 299 clubs, so only about less than 19% of the clubs in that area. If you look at Connacht, 600,000 people and 213 clubs. So the disparity is huge, and they're the kind of headline demographics, Paul, that you get from the census and you get from the demographics that the GA club are the GA organisation are looking at. What are the things in that we should be worried about, or what are the opportunities there?
So that's a very big question.
It is a big question. We'll break it down over the next hour.
So in the round, the GAA has, the first time I read about a crisis in the GAA was 1889, when it worried about the failure to spread clubs into rural areas in Connacht and in Ulster and to parts of Munster. The GAA did almost fold in 1892 when only 3 counties turned up to the annual convention. There were huge fears about emigration and the failure of some counties to have county boards as late as 1919. Donegal are in the All-Ireland football final next weekend. They had no county board. Well, they had a brief one in 1905 when Flann O'Brien's father was the county chairman. Didn't really work. So in 1919, they got their first county board. And again, in the 30s, there were worries about fielding teams. In the 50s, spectacularly. In the 80s, those of us who were teenagers in the 80s will remember the vast exodus of people from this country year after year, all of game-playing age. And we have to say that we're talking about men here because the GAA had no interest in women for most of its experience anyway, thereby creating its own crisis of participation because of its policies. But in all of these things, the death of rural Ireland has been shouted from the rooftops again and again. The imbalances in the GAA have been talked again, and people talk about the number of people who are leaving, and that it means the GAA is in imminent danger. And I just don't see it. I'm not complacent about it. I don't believe that there isn't ongoing and repeated challenges. Those challenges are both in cities where it's impossible to get land to develop grounds for enough clubs. It's in country towns where unless you can get land on the edge of the town, which creates issues for kids getting out to those grounds as well, there's a problem. And in rural areas, there's an issue of numbers. So there are issues everywhere, but these are cyclical and they depend on what's happening in a particular place. There have always been amalgamations. And there have always been clubs that have collapsed. Probably, I think the best bit of historical scholarship that I've ever seen on sport in Ireland is in the appendix. You have to bear with me on this one. Is in the appendix to the 3rd volume of the history of Dublin GAA, and it was completed by a man called Jimmy Wren. Jimmy Wren was a fellow who worked for Dublin City Council, Dublin Corporation, and he spent his evenings in the National Library and going through old newspapers. He did brilliant work on Irish nationalist history, but he also did work on the GAA. And he's got a 106, 107-page index in volume 3 of that History of Dublin GAA, where he documents the history of every single Dublin club that existed and then folded. And some of them are only a paragraph or 2 paragraphs or 3 paragraphs old. So this is collapse, rejuvenation, and it's an ongoing story. Remade, the GAA is remade by every generation in its own way.
Ciaran, you have, as Katrina mentioned, taken up hurling in your seasoned years.
Yep.
And it has made you a rare beast, the dual player.
Yep.
But it's also given you experience of 3 different types of clubs. So you have a Galway, you have your home club in Galway, you have your Dublin club, and now you have a club in the Gaeltacht in a very rural part of Waterford. Put some colour on what Paul has kind of given us, the overview on the numbers.
Okay, so my club here in Galway is Milltown. My club in Dublin is Temple Oak Sing Street, and the club that I played for last year was Old Parish in County Shanafubble in County Waterford, which plays. That's the only one of those 3 that's the dual club. So they play hurling and football, Junior B in hurling, Junior A in football. So the difference is, I mean, I think I've experienced it all now. I hope I have. I don't know if there's a 4th move in me, but the situation in Milltown is, and there are a few Milltown people here, I know, that Milltown went senior in 1961, have never gone down to intermediate, so have been senior for 64 years. And we're fielding 3 adult football teams at the moment, which is for a club well outside the commuter belt here. So if you've looked at the rolls of honour in Galway, minor hurling, minor football, over the course of the last 10 or 15 years, throw a rope around Galway City, 15 kilometres in every direction. The vast majority of trophies are being won by then. Or Mary, I can be corrected, I think they won the Football A last year and lost the Minor A final by 3 points. So inside that area, in Galway City and in the areas around it, Moycullen, you've obviously seen huge success as well, having been a club for many years but without much success. So I have an experience of that, of being a rural club in a county that has a big urban base. Temple Oak Sing Street is, I would say, a mid-sized club in Dublin. I'm involved with the minor team there this year. They have 3 minor teams, so 50 lads, between 46 and 55 lads training every. Suffice to say, that's not the case in Milltown, and that's never been the case in Milltown. And then Old Parish, you have a hurling team and a Gaelic football team, entire panel, 25 people. There's no underage setup. They amalgamate with Unryan for juvenile hurling and football. So with Milltown, like I don't know what you need to know, I suppose, but I suppose from the point of view of speaking about Milltown, like keeping our head above water is a massive thing. You know, we got to a county semi-final 3 years ago. I mean, in our wildest dreams, that was as far as we could have gone. The other 3 teams left were Currafane, Moycullen, and Mount Bellew, I think. Huge clubs compared to us. With Temple Oak Sing Street, we have 2 terrible pitches, dressing rooms, showers that work very much on a ad hoc basis, bumpy, uneven, masses of teams. You know, as I say, 3 minor teams, but consider that all the way down. Minor, under 16, under 15, under 14, under 13. Big women's section growing all the time. 2 pitches, and then public pitches wherever you can get them. And we're lucky in respecting that we have the use of pitches in Bushy Park, in Terranure, Temple Oak, and that alleviates the pressure a small bit. But it's, you know, we actually, when my first book came out, the Temple Oak Sing Street lads said we'd love to go down to Milltown to play a challenge game. So we ended up coming down on a bus, and the lads got off the bus and said, how are your facilities 10 times nicer than ours? It's like, we have the facilities, no players. You have all the players, no facilities. And so in a macro aspect, that's the problem that we have here. So that dividing line down the eastern seaboard, that's 44% of the population with 18.5% of the GA clubs. And like that is the heart of the problem. Like there just aren't enough pitches. Like say even the 3 minor teams in Temple Oak Sing Street, if all of those kids wanted to play next year, that's a complete disaster for the club. Like we have 4 adult teams. If 3 minor teams come in and they all want to play football, we have nowhere for them to go. Like we literally don't have the teams for them to play.
Paul, you mentioned that you didn't like the term super club, but when I hear Ciaran say that 3 minor teams is a mid-sized club, I'm like, well, what does a super club look like? It has to have a different word.
The minute he said that, I'm actually changing my mind on that. No, I think what I don't like about the word super club is that, and I say this as somebody who trains a minor team, the same league as Ciaran does in Dublin with Albert Plunkett's own Rua, and we have no pitch. So we use a public park for training, and the public park is, generally speaking, not available to us from the end of November to the end of March because it's always waterlogged and Dublin City Council closed the pitches. So we then go to the Phoenix Park, or we have to go out to Abbottstown to rent pitches if we can get them out in Abbottstown. So we don't have facilities either. But there's a tone, I think, when people say super club, as if there isn't huge challenges in some of those bigger Dublin clubs as well, number one. And number two, almost all, not all of them, but almost all of the people who have met in those clubs are exactly the same as the rest of us. They're trying to do the best for their kids, they're trying to do the best for their own lives, and they're trying to enjoy playing sport. So they're no different than everybody else. You might think there's huge advantages conferred on
I think
them.
you have to live it, don't you? I really feel like there is an attitude there towards big clubs that it's kind of handed to them, you know, and actually it is tough, you know. It's not maybe what people in Galway want to hear, but that's the reality, you know.
The hardest job in a club like, say, for example, Kilmacud Crokes, and I know you're going to play the violins for them, but the hardest job there is to be the pitch organiser.
Absolutely.
It is absolutely awful.
But that goes back to, so one of the biggest strengths, but also the greatest weakness of the GA is what you mentioned about the pride of place. So if everything is centred on the pride of place, well then the solutions like amalgamations or new clubs become massive shifts and huge changes that aren't easy to be brought about.
So the boundaries between clubs, you know yourselves, everybody here knows this, the boundaries between counties and the boundaries between clubs are sacred lines in Irish life. The front gate of the house that I was brought up on, we imagine it's at that wall. You come across here, that's the Westmeath boundary. This is by the grace of God. It was just so dangerous. But
it's the thrill of it though, isn't it? You know that.
Our parish snaked in and out of the county boundary, which created its own problems for eligibility. But when the talk came of splitting Dublin into 2 or 4, I've Dublin friends who were just, how can you even consider it? So my argument is you're giving more people the chance to play county football, which really annoys county hurling, which really annoys them because you got to try to poke them a little bit when they're winning. But equally, the line has to be back. Well then, if we're talking about it on a competitive basis, you have to amalgamate counties which are unsuccessful or not going well. Like Galway and Mayo, for example.
All right. Just
but Offaly and Westmeath, Offaly, Westmeath is least. People talk about the Midland Owls in OWL, but I would find it exceptionally difficult to support a team like that, to go and watch them play, to want to play for them. So you can see what happened in Welsh rugby when they did amalgamations. That loss of identity, the loss of participation, and they're reaping the reward 25 years on from the failure to identify and to be able to buy into something. And that's the problem, isn't it?
Yeah, so I think there's like a sense of relief now that we can talk about it now without it boiling down to how can we stop Dublin from winning Senior All-Irelands? Do you know what I mean? Like, you can actually talk about the issue now, whereas even like 5 or 6 years ago, it was like split Dublin in 2 or in 4 or whatever, and that magically takes care of our demographics problem, which obviously is not the case at all, you know. So I do think that like you can be a bit more clear-headed about it now, now that the Dubs have kind of retreated to the pack a small bit, and you can actually say, right, of course it's a Dublin. Of course, there's an issue in Dublin that, you know, we should be looking at. But of course, there's an issue in, like, how is Wicklow so, like, why is Wicklow the worst GA county in Ireland? Do you know what I mean? Like, how is it that they have all this population and there's just there isn't really a footprint of the GA in the county? You're not half enough. Or, like, you're from Kildare, like, the idea that
Careful now.
I know I'm
Okay, top tier 2 double champion.
you are the tier 2 double is something they'll never be able to take it away from you. Well, no, less awfully.
You set your bar at different ways. Yeah.
But you know what, like actually, and so Sinead plays for Selbridge, like a town of whatever 20,000 people, one club. Like that's a massive problem. That's a huge issue. Like
3 clubs if you count the parish. Straffing in our clock.
Well,
so we're not Naas. We're not the super
okay,
club.
So I knew that there's going to be some extremely obscure reason why they weren't Naas. So we'll take Naas then. So
fewer county champions.
Yeah. So, but Naas is actually a really interesting example, right? Because Naas is whatever 20,000, I think 25, maybe more than that, 25,000. They won the senior football, senior hurling, senior camogie the last 3 years in a row. Did they or something?
What, will we all just go watch Rory? Like, why are we over the last 3 years. Yeah.
So treble. They look like an incredibly dominant team, and it's like, okay, a perfect case study in Naas should be split in 2. It's you go in there, you make another club, more kids get the chance to play at a really high level. The population base is still absolutely there for a thriving club. But if you go to Naas, the first thing they'll say to you is, we didn't win a county senior title for 20 years until 2021, you know? So you can say they had all these advantages, and obviously the town has grown in the course of the last quarter of a century, obviously. But by the same token, it's one thing to go in and say to a club, okay, we need to actually split you in 2 because you're too big and the demographics don't work. Like, it's hard in Naas. It's even harder in a place like Selbridge that isn't getting that success at all, but the demographic reasons are still the same. You know, you may not be winning now, but you'll be winning soon. And it's really unfair on teams in South Kildare to be up against massive towns like this.
Is this a sign that the GA in general, like from top to bottom, has become too competitive? That there are people who are driving by clubs, even in Dublin, even in the really populated areas, driving by clubs that aren't thriving to get to more successful clubs, be it that there's more playing pitches because they've been more successful, there's more volunteers because they've been more successful, or there's more chance of winning silverware?
Look, this is extremely difficult to answer that because sport is inherently competitive. And if it's the 2 of us out playing keepy-uppies and Sinead comes out and beat you, which would probably haven't beat us, that's a competition between the 3 of us.
Yeah.
So sport, there's an inherent level of sport at every level. You look at kids outside and they put down jumpers and they're playing football between them. That's a competition between them and they're trying to win. So you understand that in all play and in all sport there is competition. The question for me is recruitment and providing kids with a chance to play. I don't care where someone is from once they have the opportunity to play is there. And the reality of life in Dublin now is that the GAA in Dublin now is unbelievably middle class. The area between the canals gets a little bit of the Kevin's Hurling Club and St. Brendan's on the south side and St. Brendan's on the north side. But look at that south side of the river. Between the Liffey and the canal, there are 10 primary schools there, and in those 10 primary schools, there is not one blade of grass. Not one. So in those 10 areas, there is no club grounds that is a meaningful opportunity to play rugby, to play Gaelic. I don't care what a kid plays, by the way, when it comes down to it. I don't see us as being morally superior because we're in the GAA. I don't care what sport. If somebody kid wants to play a sport, let them do it. What we have singularly failed to do, repeatedly though, is to provide opportunities and places to play for people who are in whole swathes of our society. If you look at the most recent reports by the ESRI, by the Central Statistics Office and by Sport Ireland, what they all show is that how much money you have in your household determines how likely you are to play sport. Much more than gender, actually. It's class that divides. Gender is a dividing factor, but class is the ultimate dividing factor here. And there are whole swathes of Dublin and whole swathes of country towns, and I'll bet money whole swathes of Galway, where the GAA has a nominal presence because it doesn't fit in the community.
Ciaran, on the competitive side of it, like I get the argument that sport is inherently competitive, but there are things you can do. The LGFA have brought in Mothers and Others, which had kind of a slow burn start, but now has up to 500 clubs have a Mothers and Others team. They play seriously but not competitively. So if you talk to any of them that say the rules are always adhered to, there's always proper refereeing, or as much as there is proper refereeing, and it will be competitive to what they want. Like, I interviewed somebody recently who had just started at age 51 to play, and it was her first ever kind of chance to play any sport or any team sport. And she came in and she was like, I just understand it now. I never got it. And she just had this like glow on her face. She had scored 1-1 the night before in a training match. And honestly, it was like she was reborn.
How much was from freeze, though, Sinead? First question you always have to ask, you know. She on the freeze.
But so like, we've figured out Go games and we've figured out Mothers and Others. So surely there is a way that we can, not just kind of be the masters of being the professional amateurs, that there is a way that we can figure out, and is that a pathway to new clubs and to amalgamated clubs, and everybody feeling, well, we can have our pride of place and shift it to where we can get more people playing or make the resource question a little bit easier.
Yeah, like I've always said that I would love like a GA version of like five-a-side, like that idea that you literally, it's an hour out of your week and that's it. And genuinely no one cares. But I don't know that you can take that out of the GA. I don't know, like it's so easy to be, when you were playing senior football, to be like, well, sure, like, when I'm 38 or whatever, I'll go play a bit of junior and relax, And then you're the lunatic at junior training going and like that's.
I saw you earlier this year.
Yeah, I know. Like I'm not proud of anything I've ever done as a junior player, but like that is it. Do you know what I mean? Like you can't not care about it, and I think that's. Like that, you're right, it's a problem. Like it does make the thing a lot more difficult, because if you're given the jersey, then, you attach importance to it, and then that's your, like it is a stumbling block if you were just saying, well, listen, when you get to junior, like you can just break off and play, you can give games to more and more people. That's kind of that's not the lived experience, Like when it comes to like the idea of, kids being driven past smaller clubs, like that is a key problem, and like that's a parental problem, like it's the parent that wants the kid to be playing for a successful Division 1 or Division 2 team. The kid doesn't care, Well,
what if they're saying we just want them to have the opportunities to play at the highest level if they're very good?
Yeah, I think that the opportunities there, like, say to take the example of the junior B hurling team I was talking out with last year. Like I was playing with a guy who played for the Waterford under-20s team last year, and that's a cross for him that he had to bear, I'm afraid. But like the route is there. The route is still there for smaller clubs to produce players. That, Seamus Hardy he's on the bench tomorrow. But like I said, I just never had a inter-county hurler until him, and he's like an all-time great now for me of Cork hurling. So I think that there is, like, the route is still there. But, and again, we're talking about Dublin just because I suppose it's the lived recent experience of me and Paul. But, like, you can actually say, like, all those clubs that rose and fall and were died away in Dublin, so many of them were artisans, or what I mean, that they were like merchants, or they were like there was a specific thing around which these people cohered. They set up a club and left again, and then when that died away, whether it was a factory or whether it was a union, then the club dies. So if you're looking at it in Dublin, like it is easy to divide teams up into housing estates or into schools. If you go to that school, then you go to this club, and if there's if there's a solution in there, then I think that's possibly something we should be looking at, you know. But like I know myself, I've a friend lives in Killiney. Coola is there for him if he wants to bring his kid there, but he's like, I don't want to go to Coola. I don't want to be, you know, I don't want him to be playing for, you know, the Coola fourth team if that's his level. I'd rather go to a smaller club. You get more coaching. He's more invested in it. He's not just a number and a sea of numbers. I think like that kind of thinking is not that common, but it is, maybe it's the genesis of the way out of that problem.
I was thinking about those clubs just in preparation for coming down here and reading those ones about why does a club die. And I know we have to always pretend that everyone in the GAA who was alive in 1916 was in the GPO or was wearing green or was willing to die for Ireland. There was a club in Dublin called Gladstonians. So I think if you've got a club in a county which is called after a British Prime Minister, maybe your history is a little bit more complicated than you like to pretend. I think it comes down to this idea of driving past a club to go to another club. These kind of work out in the rounds because there are people in the bigger clubs who get fed up in being clubs and not getting maybe the attention they deserve, and they drift back into other clubs. So it can work a little bit in the round. The parish rule has never applied in Dublin. It doesn't now apply in Westmeath, and there are counties all across the country who are going to have to look at the parish rule and its meaning. And I say straight out, I'm from Tullamore Club in Offaly, and I'm ashamed when I hear you say that Milltown field 3 teams. Although you probably have embarrassed the parish by taking up hurling, but like I do,
they'll come around eventually.
Three in Milltown. There are 3 senior football teams in Tullamore in a town of more than 10,000 people. That's amazing. Which is just wrong. So I just think it's really easy. Tullamore people who are born in Tullamore should be allowed to go out and play with all the country clubs that may want them if there are sons or daughters of parents who are from those clubs. Just relax the playment of the rules and just let people play.
That was going to be my next question about the 3 Milltown teams. Like the pride of place being a strength and a weakness, but there's, just to be very simple, and there's football and hurling, and in some places they're just maintaining football teams and there's no effort whatsoever on participation numbers for hurling. And is that something that can be tackled through this demographic question and the GA looking at this demographic question?
I think Go Games have really improved things in terms of access to stuff, but I have a brother who lives in Kilkenny who tried to get football into O'Loughlin Gales, and it's a war crime in Kilkenny.
How's he doing? Is he up and
he's okay.
Food?
He's taking food. Yeah. I mean, it's being mashed still. But
Okay.
I'll let you that one whataboutery. Back to football, people blocking hurling.
Sorry. No, it is true. But like you're asking, the first thing, if you want to train a senior football team, the ideal thing is that nobody on that team is playing hurling. We can pretend otherwise, but I know if I train a senior football team, I would prefer to have all the players all the time. I would prefer to work on the county team as well, by the way, and that you just had them for the year. I prefer they didn't go on J1 visas, and I would prefer that they weren't playing hurling 2 days a week as well. And I think it's really hard to be competitive senior level. I think if it's participation you want, and it's just that, then play junior in both.
Ciaran, as a recent dual player.
Junior. Again,
I don't think Sinead agrees with this point.
Yeah, I don't think she does either, but that's fine. It's really tough, right? But having played, and I cannot I don't want to overstate it, but I did 6 months as a dual player, but it's hurling with a bit of football, you know? And there are very, very few clubs that are dual in the true sense, you know? And if you can talk all you like about massive clubs that have won county titles at senior level in both, are they actually dual clubs? They're not. The vast majority of them are hurling clubs in hurling counties that are decent at football, that know that they can water ski to a county semi-final, and then the week of the county semi-final in football, they'll be like, right lads, out with the footballs, we'll do a bit of training here, and they're good enough to win county titles, you know? So the idea of a dual club, even the big ones that you're thinking of in your head, are not actually dual clubs in a real, in the real sense, you know. So like, I don't know. I think it's kind of it's a tangential issue here, but I am inclined to think though that it should be offered. You know, it should be offered to me as a 10-year-old. Without like giving away the first 3 pages of my book, I do remember of the like when I was 11 years old, I went down to the GA pitch in Milltown with my dad, who's from Waterford obviously, and played a bit of hurling. So these might be the only 2 hurleys in Milltown now, right? The one in my hand and the one in Dad's hand. And I must have been injured or something, because I remember my teammates running laps around me, my under 11 or under 12 teammates running laps. And I remember getting like slagged off for playing hurling on a GA pitch in a county that had been in the All-Ireland Senior Hurling Final that year. So if I was 11, that was 1993, Galway played in the All-Ireland Hurling Final that year. And I just remember, and the big thing I remember about it was, not so much that I was getting slagged, but that it was like, this seems like it's a bit of an affectation on my part. Do you know, that like, oh, I'd be down here playing hurling, and that I'm saying something about myself that like, oh, we're hurlers as well. Like, that's insane to me, you know, and the more you think about it, the further away from that time you get, the more you actually think that's daft. You know, like if it turns out that at under 16 and there are clubs in Galway that think this way, that when it comes to under 16 or under 17, you pick one and that's it. Well then, you know, then that's when you start talking about parish rules. And if there are people in Milltown who played hurling for 4 years and want to keep playing hurling, well, there are clubs maybe within 15 miles that they can go and play, but they've been given the chance. The old Gerlach Nan line, if you haven't started by 7, it's probably too late. Like, you know, he was proven correct in my case, but but it is true, you know. But give the kids the chance, and even if you think as a club you can't offer adult football and adult hurling, then at least you've given the kid, him or herself, the chance to play hurling, and then let them go and find elsewhere. The other question you'll come to as well is amalgamations. Amalgamations are extremely fraught in many cases. But in the case of, are there 20 kids in Milltown and I think there's like 7 senior football clubs within 8 miles of Tuam. None of them offer hurling, right? So are there 20 16-year-olds or 17-year-olds if all 8 of those clubs gave hurling till the age of 16, surely there are 20 kids that want to keep playing hurling, and you amalgamate them, and it doesn't weaken anyone. It doesn't weaken any of the individual units. All you're doing is just giving kids the chance to play.
That's the pathway I see, Paul, especially in non-hurling counties or those so-called weaker counties, is like give people opportunities, but then you also have to give them pathways to actually doing it properly, and county boards need to come on board. On the amalgamation question or the new club question, or the Castleknock St. Bridget's example that, you know, Castleknock GA set up, and it was kind of like looked down upon until they got good. What's the best route to kind of figure out the superclub versus rural depopulation problem? I know we're discussing that's not really a problem, but to even up the books a little bit on participation numbers.
So if we look at depopulation, first of all, it's all fine for the GAA to say, well, we want to work with the government to stop rural depopulation. This is a global phenomenon. It's not just an Irish phenomenon. 1 million people around the world every day move to urban areas from rural areas. Urbanization is a fact, a global fact of life. We can say whether it's good or bad or whatever way you take it, it's a fact of life, which has to be dealt with. In terms of the GAA, in both rural and urban areas, the idea that there's a one-size-fits-all model for every county or within counties of each clubs is ridiculous. Even in Offaly itself, I see the hurling clubs, broadly speaking, stay on their own apart from a couple. Some clubs have actually almost fully amalgamated, although they keep different names. And then there are agglomerations of other clubs who play in the football championship. So it works in different ways in different places. And the idea that you would be stuck in a model is the death of sport. Like, sport has changed fundamentally. And by the way, this has been going on since the first All-Ireland in 1887, when the Galway champions played the Tipperary champions in the final. The Tipperary champions were Thurles. The club represented the county in the All-Ireland final. On the week of the game, the Thurles Club went around to Moycarkey, they went to 2 Mile Boris, they went to a couple of other clubs around the area, and they picked the best players from the clubs that they'd played against, and they put them into the Thurles team on the week of the game. So love of place was kind of abandoned in pursuit of victory. The Galway champions weren't actually the Galway champions because there was no Galway championship played. They just pretended to be the Galway champions, and that was Meelick. And Meelick didn't just play as Meelick. Meelick played as Aircourt. They had Aircourt, they had Collimer, and they had the other ones. I can't remember which other ones. So people have always pulled people in from different areas, and it has gone on and on and on, generation after generation, and we are no different.
I think there is a situation, though, where kind of the fact that the GAA is like 32 distinct county boards, own personal fiefdoms, run in a very specific, like that has been a weakness of the GAA for a long time. But in this particular case, the idea that you can actually sit down and say, what's the best thing to do here? And you don't have to, if you're Longford, you don't have to think about the situation in Cork. You know, I think that is a point in the county boards' favour around the country. You can actually sit down and say, what suits us here? And you don't have to think about the national question, you know.
That's where Peter Horgan in Croke Park is brilliant.
Yeah.
Like he says, here are solutions, and they go to your thing about if you want to have non-competitive play, have non-competitive play. If you want to go to 11 aside on a smaller pitch, go to 11 aside.
Yeah. And I think that the freedom that allows you is something that actually, that's where the answer is to all of this, you know? That there's no point in us saying that, well, listen, overall, this is what should happen. It literally comes down to the fact, situations like Northeast Galway is a totally different, the answer to the question up there maybe is a totally different question, or a totally different answer to what you'd have in South Connemara. But we have that flexibility, and that's where the answers are.
The counterpoint to that flexibility is something like integration, where you will look at the lottery of being a woman in the GAA, where if you're in one club, if you're in a functioning one club, you have probably a great standard of equality. If you're in a non-one club, good luck to you getting a pitch or a dressing room. And if you're in a county where the county board have great relationships between the executives, and you have maybe someone like Kevin O'Donoghue in Cork who thinks integration is the top priority for the county, you're in a great place. Benny Hurl, the demographics guy for the GAA, thinks that doing integration by 2027 is madness. When you're talking about demographics and you're not going to talk about women, how is that going to solve any problem, Paul?
The GAA, I think, when it comes to participation and to demographics, has 4 major issues. I mentioned class already. The second issue is migrants and the abject failure of GAA clubs all around the place, with notable exceptions, and individual cases are different, to build on the fact that there are 12 to 15% of the population who are not Irish in the inverted commas traditional sense of the word. The third area is Protestants, particularly in Northern Ireland, and the pious words that are spoken every so often about inclusivity and the desire for a united Ireland, but the absolute unwillingness to take really serious concrete measures to include people. But the fourth idea is women. If you look at the minute books of the GAA, this is a remarkable fact, but it's true. Well, the first couple of minute books are lost. So the earliest minute book dates from 1899. The first 15 years are gone. Between 1899 and 1971, there is one woman mentioned in the minute books of the GAA, and it's Maud Gonne, who was mentioned for an organisation she set up before the Easter Rising. So and I come from a household where I'm the oldest of 4 boys, but my mother was the driving force behind our love of sport. She played absolutely everything and loved it. And I cannot, with 2 daughters who are 18 and 20 still playing, and I hope going to continue to play, they love it too. I just cannot be in a room with somebody who can't see equality and who imagines that there is equality there at the moment. And anybody who opposes integration, or not, that's not right. Anyone who isn't working for integration, I think they should be ashamed of themselves. I just can't see it.
Yeah, obviously we've had a lot of discussions about integration, and it is weird, you know, it's one of these situations where like we've got so much to think about. I'm stealing your line because you've said it to me that many times, but like, you know, there's so much to do, you know, like how do you go about doing it, you know? And of course the answer is
Do it.
but it's already happening.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like all of these clubs already exist. All the camogie players that want to play are playing. All the women's footballers that are playing are already playing. Like, integration is basically just throwing your hat over the wall in the old JFK line and thereby giving yourself no option but to hop the wall and go get it, you know? Like, it's just
happening except in name.
Yeah, exactly. That's what it is. Like, it's a as far as I'm concerned, it's a rebrand is what we're talking about. Do you know what I mean? Like, the fact of the matter is, everyone who wants to play is playing, so let's just go and do it. I
don't think that's right, Ciaran, I'm sorry to say that. I don't think everyone who wants to play is playing, or the opportunity isn't provided there, because there are swathes of the country where ladies Gaelic football or camogie are not on offer.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. But I suppose what I'm saying is that to grow it is the problem, whether we're integrated or not. Do you know what I mean? But I absolutely accept the point that, like, the women's football and camogie will grow as a result of integration. But this idea that, it's going to cost £1 billion. I saw this in the Examiner somewhere.
Yeah.
Like, it's going to cost £1 billion to integrate the... No, it's £1 billion we'd be spending anyway, because we've decided that we want women to be playing the sport. So whether the GAA is integrated or not, it actually doesn't make any difference. Like, the problem is there. We're going to attack the problem. Integration is just one way of saying we're serious about it.
But it's also a way to try and get money out of the government. It seems this idea that the taxpayer should contribute to the GAA being integrated. Now, I'm a lifelong GAA member. I love the GAA. My kids are involved in the Camogie Association and the LGFA. The taxpayer should not pay for the integration of the GAA.
Yeah.
That's that's us.
Just to pull, before we go to questions from the audience, just to pull on that thread that you mentioned around the integration of migrants into the GAA. You said it's a failure. Why has it been a failure?
Because, how am I going to say this? I think, so I've really enjoyed this discussion, because we disagree on some things, or we disagree on some things, and it's a fairly civilized conversation. And there are people out here who will be totally in disagreement with some of the things I've said, or Ciaran has said, or Sinead has said. But it's a civilized conversation where people have respect for another point of view. But then you look at discourse elsewhere, and everybody seems to be really angry. And I'll give an example of it. I went back on Twitter 3 weeks ago for the first time in 7 years. Now, Twitter was an open sewer 7 years ago, but it's now an open sewer in which the hatred of all migrants in every country is driven by algorithms and by hate speech and by a right-wing agenda, which is utterly deplorable. And it has coloured so many people's opinions and prejudices, and it has basically denied humanity to people and othered people who have come to a certain place. And you have to acknowledge that as an organisation, the membership of the GAA does not reflect what we see in our streets around us, in our counties. There is no correspondence between the faces who you see in coming to Munskull games in Croke Park, for example, and the GAA clubs that are serving communities, which tells me that there's a basic disconnect between schools and clubs in urban areas. And that is a failure of the organisation to make that bridge between a school and a club. That's no one else's failure bar ours. We can't lament the declining numbers of GAA members and allow that bridge not be in existence, number one. Number two, it's hard to get people who may not feel like they totally belong, may not quite understand the game. You have to work at that. Where's the promotional literature? Number three, every county council in Ireland now has an integration officer, or at least has an integration office. The GAA in every county should work with that integration office to try and find ways to pull people in. So there's two solutions, schools and in the integration office.
And to go full circle, we can't really be the glue until that happens in current Ireland. We have about 10 minutes for questions. If anyone has a question, there's a couple of microphones that are roving, so just put your hand up and let it be known. One here in the middle.
Better put my glasses on. Kisses family. Safe enough.
Maybe the question, thanks. Maybe the question first, but then I'd like to add to it. Is the concentration has been on the GA and coming to terms with, we'd say, the demographics. Too many people in these, too few in the West, and so on and so forth. Is it a national question? Should there be pressure put on from whatever sources, GA and non-GA, in relation to the development of the country? That's not a good idea, having that sort of unequal population spread. And that's a real issue, because it comes down to decisions on economics and social and culture and so on and so forth. Okay, the other aspect is in relation to my own background, small rural parish. And what we started doing at a certain stage, now I was the youngest, and there was olders who this was established. We might even play town lands, you know, in the area, and it wouldn't be just GAA; it would be multi-sports. That led on to us at primary school level, arranging to play other schools in the parish on our own. And to me, I think it's incredible now to look back on it. Yeah. That's what we did. And we walked, for the most part. Some had bikes, but we were walking as well. And then the club took it up. And it was at a time when a lot of our age couldn't afford shorts and boots. You know, you get the cheap ones. And like many others at the time, we changed at the side of a ditch where there was rain and hail and so on. So a lot of it is coming from the ground up in that. And also, women were playing at that time. I remember, particularly at sports days, there was matches and they were well supported. Yeah. What happened after that? Like I was too young to really know what was going on. But I think there was a receptiveness and openness, but maybe there weren't, you know, sufficient will and power at certain levels. I don't know. So I'm wondering, just is there a place, and along the areas that you mentioned, Paul, in relation to immigrants and so on, for a ground up and to support and allow that to, or kind of develop as well, without necessarily forcing it from the top?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, I think so. Yeah, like I think that's actually how it has to happen, to be honest. You know, as for like the idea that it's absolutely a national question. You know, and I think that GA people are guilty sometimes of looking at things through a strictly GA prism. You know, like this is a problem because rural clubs are suffering with numbers, but like that's a societal problem, and the GA is just it's where it's seen, you know, it's a symptom of it, in the same way that the school rule book is, you know, that's where you see it, but you see it more clearly, or you see it beyond kind of a school setting in the GA, you know, where you're like clubs that used to be able to be playing in A and B in under 14, under 16 are now in C and D. That's just the reality of the situation. So I do think that like GA people can get very like hyper focused on, there has to be a GA solution to this. Sometimes you just have to admit that, you know, 1 million people a day around the world going from rural to urban is a pretty unbelievable statistic, you know, and there's not a lot that we can do as a sporting organisation to try and turn that tide around. That's just the reality of life.
The rural development policy of the state is fantastic. It is a brilliant document which sets out exactly what should be done. The problem with it is, it reminds me of the boxes of files that are in the National Archives where Katrina used to work on draining the Shannon. Yeah. It is policy after policy after policy, and the difficulty, first of all, the incapacity of doing it, and second of all, the resources needed to do it, and third of all, it's really difficult to go in the face of the sands of time. And what it comes down to is the building of houses in sustainable communities. And the state has singularly failed in successive governments, north and south, to provide housing for people. Singularly failed, and until that changes, there is no prospect of the GEA being able to do anything to change what's happening.
I think that just the one thing that the GA could do differently at the highest level is currently it treats itself in the same way as the IRFU or the FAI, and it goes into Oireachtas committees and it goes into lobbying in the same way that those organisations do, but they could actually use their capital and use the power that they have over politicians a little bit differently, in my view. I think that they do have more capital. They are the same people, mostly. The TDs are the GA people and vice versa. And instead of making short-term decisions about or helping clubs get capital funding, you can make longer-term decisions and get your politicians to think more about their legacy rather than their popularity in the area. And I think that's one thing that the GA probably could do in a way that the RFU and the FAI don't.
Yeah.
So I just took off my host hat there and just became a panelist.
Yeah. I feels like we should have done that earlier.
Yeah. I think that point is brilliant, and it is the key. It's the key to it. And there are towns. Everybody here knows small towns in Ireland where there are derelict properties in the middle of them. The idea that they're left. I don't know if there's anyone here from Boyle. I was in Boyle last year, and I could not believe the number of buildings in the middle of Boyle. A beautiful old town with lots going for it. And I just kind of thought, if you ran an urban regeneration thing here and created houses out of a lot of these buildings, you would be a long way to do it. But why wouldn't Roscommon County Board band together with local people to try and drive that policy to do that?
Just put them under so much pressure.
Maybe the clubs who were against Boyle probably wouldn't have wanted it.
Yeah. There's like 8 clubs in an 8-mile radius with not a fucking chance. Yeah.
Do we have any other questions there? And then there's one other back there as well.
Yeah, just briefly, great discussion, everyone. You touched on at the end there about the role of national schools. Like, when I was in primary school, I went to a small national school in Kilkenny, and the core subjects were Irish, English, maths, and hurling, right? And Martin Fogarty actually was a principal in the school, you might be aware of. But for years, the GAA have piggybacked on the national school system and national school teachers promoting hurling off their own back. People with a passion for hurling who introduced hurling into schools all over the country that there was never a team in, and the clubs then got those players. Now, that's changing, as far as a lot of us can see. Like, there are schools in Galway City that never see a hurl, which is unbelievable, right? Unbelievable. Is it time, do you think, that the GAA took a more coordinated approach with the schools and unashamedly put a team of people in to tackle that and say, look, we need people in the schools promoting hurling, and to kind of not just say there's a grant here, put in a GPO, or you know what I mean? What do you think on that point?
Yeah, well, obviously that's happening to some extent in Dublin with Games Promotions officers, but I do also understand that a visit once a week or twice a week is very different to kind of how we would have grown up, which was, you know, you're playing it yourself. Like, no one has to come in and hand the hurley to you or hand a Gaelic football to you. You're just playing all the time, and that's supported in the school, be it, you know, in a formal sense or in an informal sense. Obviously, it's different. It is different now. I don't know. Again, like, it's kind of, you know, should the GA have like a massive overarching presence in a national school? You know, I don't know. Are we overstating our, overstating our importance to the country by suggesting that that's the right thing to do? I don't know what the answer to that is. But certainly your point is absolutely correct. The way it used to be was a brilliant arrangement for the GA, but obviously modern life is rather different. And the idea that, you know, national school teachers, you see it in secondary schools as well, secondary school teachers stay behind for 3 hours after class, unpaid, to take teams. It is a different lifestyle now. And I don't know, you can kind of bemoan that, or you can say, right, we did pretty well out of that for 140 years, and if we have to change, then that's the reality. I don't know.
I don't know if it should be specifically hurling. Obviously, I'd love it to be specifically hurling, but I think as long as it's sport. I had an interview with Tracy Couch, former sports minister in the UK recently, and when she always wanted to be sports minister. When she was starting off her political career, that was her aim. And when she was getting it from David Cameron, she went into his office and she had this plan, because sports in education was always in the education portfolio and not in the sport portfolio. So she said to David Cameron, can I take sports and education into my portfolio? And he said, no, that's in education. And she said, well, I'll have failed in my job and I'll have failed in my ministerial office already if I leave this office without sport. And he gave it to her. And she said it has become much more integrated. Like she put the blueprint together and kind of nothing happens now without the sports minister being called. She said, like, if there's a problem in a school or there's a problem in an area, the sports function kind of gets like kind of going. Now, I'm sure it's not perfect, but at least there's a blueprint for it. And I just thought it was an interesting point when we're talking about the sports integration.
So I agree with that. And what I'd say is it's just pure wrong that a kid could go through national school and not be exposed to hurling. But any kid who goes through national school should be exposed to a range of as many different things and experiences as they possibly can. The reality of it is that the latest survey shows that only 15% of Irish school kids get the Department of Education's minimum basics required recommendation number of hours in a week of physical education. And we wonder why we grow kids with obesity and we provide that. 15% get it, not beyond that. Mm.
Do we have time for one question? There's one man there with a final question.
I just want to make a few points. One word that wasn't used by either of you was leadership. I didn't hear that word being used.
Leadership.
Leaders, sorry.
Leadership.
Yeah.
Leadership. I won't go into it because it has been lacking in the GAA in many areas for years and years. And I mean local level in particular. Now I'll concentrate on Galway so that people will take a special interest. 40 years ago, there were 11 senior A post-primary schools participating in Galway, in Connacht. 11. 6 or 7 of those represented the province at our Ireland semi-final stage. Today there are 5, and the flag is being carried by just 2 today, if you check your statistics. Presentation College Athenry and Rayfields Lochray. Now, the barometer for the health of your game in any county is the health of it in your schools. And as the previous speaker spoke there, it started in the national schools, where voluntary effort of great men usually, the voluntary effort of great men promoted the game in every school, whether it's hurling or football. Today, that's gone. National schools, secondary schools don't play near the role now in promoting the game as they did years ago. That's because, again, it's mainly a feminine, I'm not being anti them now, feminine, they have their feminine profession, 85% of them.
Sorry to just interrupt, but we're just about to run out of time. Do you have a
All right,
question?
okay, what I'm saying is, we're going to spend 200, 300 million in Belfast. We haven't a pitch in Dublin, or Kildare, or Wicklow, but we have 200, 300 million to spend above in Belfast, where one day of the year it'll be full.
Grant, we'll
now, excuse me, I just want to say,
there just has to be a question.
Is, have we got our priorities right?
Okay.
Yeah. Well, the Belfast question is obviously a very involved, like a deeply involved question, you know. And it's not going to be 200 or 300 million of the GA's money, but it's absolutely the. I mean, it's still we have to make the decision to spend it there rather than spend it in Clonus. I'd be inclined to be spending it in Clonus. I know you've written about it as well. That the juice has to be worth the squeeze, and at this stage, it's probably not. But yeah, I mean, I think we've covered the schools thing pretty well. But I mean, I don't think there's any point in, you know, like we have to deal with the situation as it is now. You know, the situation as it used to be was very, very beneficial to the GAA, but I don't think we can say that we can't just look to that and say that's what's going to happen. We have to move with the times in that respect, I think.
Yeah.
There is absolutely no way that 200 million should be spent on a pitch in Belfast. Absolutely no way. Number one. Number two, I'm very, very proud to say that I have 3 kids, 2 of whom played for county, 1 played for the club. The inspiration to them were the 2 female teachers who taught them in the national school where they went.
thank you for that note of optimism to end. And I think most of us who are here from a GAA background can pick out the people in our background who inspired us, male, female, whether they were camogie players or hurlers or footballers, or the people who knitted the club together by being the pitch secretary, which is always the most important person in a one club. Thank you all so much for coming. If you'd like to talk to us afterwards, we'll be hanging around. We might see you for a pint in Galway City somewhere this evening, and enjoy the rest of the festival and the rest of the weekend of sport, and up Cork, up Tip.